the word to Mr. Hassan to say something about Mr. Yanis.
Dr. Yanis. Dr. Yanis, we contacted him because we would like him, since he did his PhD in Islamic Studies from Strasbourg University on contemporary. The title of his PhD is the Contemporary Islamic Legal Hermeneutics, which is in Arabic is Manahij Ijtihad al-Mu'asir. Okay, so Dr. Yanis, of course, he got also his he studied in 1 year to improve his Arabic language, and he studied in University of Kuwait. He was in Kuwait for the whole year to study Arabic. The program title, Arabic Language and Islamic Civilization. He participated in several conferences from all over the world. In Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Oman, Turkey, Malaysia, Canada, USA, Belgium, and of course he's interested in he's defending Islam against Islamophobia in France. So, and of course he did 1 year. He was in he was a scholar. He was a researcher in residence at the Scamberg Center in New York. So he focused on doing research for the research, of course, on the history of American Muslims, the American black Muslims, and he's still doing his research. He's still continuing his research in the same area, and of course, currently he's a lecturer in Islamic Studies at the European Institute of Human Sciences in Paris. I would like to give the speech to Dr. Yanis, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear students, colleagues, I would like first to thank the University Ibn Zohr and my dear colleagues, Dr. Hassan, Dr. Rashid. And it's a double honor for me to be here. First of all, of course, it's always a pleasure for a scholar and a teacher to deliver a lecture in a university or any educational institution. And as it has been said, I'm originally from Morocco, even if I was born and raised in France. And my father is from Chera, so being able to deliver a speech here means a lot for me. So I would like to thank you all. And I'm just gonna talk a little bit about my work, my PhD, and some backgrounds about Islamic studies in the West, in Europe, as well as in North America, and how, for me, I see Islamic studies following the academic way of the West could be complementary to traditional Islamic studies, which is more known in the Islamic world. Of course, there is a long tradition of Orientalism, which has been criticized by many scholars, and the most important and maybe famous work on that is the one of Edward Said, who was professor at Columbia University in New York. And it's true that what we call Orientalism or Western Islamic studies has been used as a tool to attack also Muslims or Islam, or trying to falsify what is really Islam and the Islamic civilization. And it's true that it was also a way to colonize the mindset of people and promoting a wrong picture of what Islam is or what is the history of Muslims and Islamic civilization. But there are many positive aspects of Western Islamic studies, and we can mention many great scholars, to mention some French scholars, someone like Henri Laouste, who was back in the days professor at the Collège de France, known for his work on Islamic studies. What he has written, for instance, on the Madhab Hanbali, the school of law, the Hanbali school of law, is wonderful, and even some scholars from the Islamic world acknowledge the asset and the contribution of Henri Laouste and other. I can mention Linan de Belfond, who has written on Islamic law, specifically on Islamic law and contracts, fiqh al-uqud, and family law, ahwal al-shakhsiyya. And we have many examples, and it was the same in the US, in UK, and until today we have within Islamic studies this debate between different trends. And I'm going to give you two examples. One of the most influential scholars in Islamic studies was a German scholar named Joseph Schacht. Maybe some of you heard about him. Yeah. And he was very influential, and at one point his views were overwhelming Islamic studies in the West. And one of his points was that Islamic law is very narrow-minded because of the gate of Ijtihad has been closed, in the Middle Ages. Yeah. So there is no possibility, there is no space for interpretation, for new understanding, for adaptation to a new context and reality within Islamic law. And then you have a scholar that you have maybe heard about him, Wael Hallaq, Professor Wael Hallaq, who is currently professor at Columbia University in New York, who is a scholar, a Western scholar in Islamic studies, even if originally he's from Palestine, and he's Christian. He wrote a famous academic paper, Was the Gate of Ijtihad Closed? And actually, he deconstructed everything which has been said before, especially by Schacht. And now, the thesis of Schacht is even almost not taken into account. And this paper of Wael Hallaq has changed from within the framework of Islamic studies. And now we know that Ijtihad and interpretation of Islamic law, renewal of Islamic law, has been practiced from the beginning until today. And even you have other scholars, such as Professor Sherman Jackson, who is an African-American Muslim, but he's a scholar in a university in California, I forgot which one. He just published a book named, I think, something like Islamic Secularism, which is a very interesting book. And Sherman Jackson said, trying to be in between Schacht and Hallaq, saying, yeah, it's true that Ijtihad was always practiced, but we can't say that, during the 12th century, Ijtihad was practiced as it was at the beginning. So there is this very interesting debate. And actually, for me, this is also interesting for the scholars of Islamic law, of Islamic sciences, who are studying or teaching Islam from within, as what we call ulama. They can get some interesting perspective, because you have some very serious scholars in the West who are just analyzing Islam from another perspective, but it doesn't mean that this perspective is wrong. It could be complementary. And yes, it's true, and even Professor Jonathan Brown, who is a professor of Islamic studies at Georgetown University, he was saying, when I was meeting ulama in different countries, in Egypt, I think he mentioned Morocco as well, he said, I was impressed by the quality of their knowledge, of their research, and I saw how sometimes Western scholars are arrogant, just seeing this as non-scientific because those people are religious. But having a religious rationality which is different maybe from a kind of Western conception of rationality, doesn't mean that it's not rationality, and doesn't mean that it's not scientific. It's just another framework. So both frameworks for me could be complementary. And we had the same issue about hadith and about the sunnah. Joseph Schacht and other Western scholars, basically said that all hadith are wrong and they are not reliable historically, and they gave some arguments about that. And you have some other scholars within the framework of Western academia who challenged this opinion and said, no, we have historical material. We can prove that the books of hadith are to a certain extent reliable, and why and what, but not based upon religious arguments, but based upon historical proof, based upon the human sciences, etc. And I can mention one German-Turkish scholar in Islamic studies, Fuad Sezgin, who wrote his PhD on that, and definitely for me destroyed what has been said by Shah before. And he showed, for example, that even Bukhari used written materials, for the hadith, not only oral. And Jonathan Brown, until today, is doing this work also, and what he has written on hadith, his different books on that, are very relevant and are a great contribution. And there is someone which is also making the issue complex, but for me more interesting. You have people who are in between. They are at the same time scholars in Islamic studies within the Western academia, and being themselves Muslims, they are also trying to contribute from within the Islamic tradition and Islamic thought. And one example is Dr. Muhammad Hamidullah, rahmatullah alayh, who was originally from India, and he is known in France because he lived in France. He has written many books in French as well as, of course, in English. And he's the one, for instance, who discovered in a German library, so everything in the West, it was in a German library, a copy of the original of Sahifat, I forgot the name, Sahifat Hammam al-Munabbi. And so he showed that this material was reliable and true, and until today, to the best of my knowledge, it is the oldest surviving book of hadith. So Hamidullah has done that from within the Western academia, and he was known in France, being within the CNRS and the official institutions. And at the same time, he was himself a dedicated Muslim who was lecturing in the Muslim world. He was at one point lecturing in Turkey, for instance, and he contributed also to Islamic thought and knowledge from within. So there is many interactions which are possible. We just have to understand who is who, what is the framework, what is the context, and sometimes it needs some efforts. I remember I gave this example, but when I was doing my master degree at Strasbourg University, so of course French academia, a fellow student came from Egypt. He graduated from Jamiat al-Azhar, so he has this traditional mindset. So for him it was hard to adapt himself to the framework of French academia, the way we are dealing with the sources, with what we call primary sources, secondary sources. For instance, when we are quoting the scriptural sources, Quran or Sunnah or the ulama, we don't quote them as the religious truth, as the religious truth. We just quote them as the object or the subject of our study. Just trying to take a step back about what we are studying or researching. But it doesn't mean that we can't have the faith and being a faithful Muslim. No, it's two different things. And about the issue of the subject and the object and taking a step back, you have in Morocco Muhammad Abd al-Jabari, who has written very interesting things on that and about the methodology. So I think this issue as an introduction was interesting, and you have among the greatest professors, for instance in America or even in France, who are also Muslims. One of my professors at Strasbourg University, Éric Geoffroy, he's also Muslim, but he's also a professor in the kind of French academia. Jonathan Brown that I mentioned is Muslim. You have at Harvard University, someone that I know, I had the chance to know personally, Professor Zahra. She's Muslim too, and she's the head of Islamic law department in Harvard University. So just this as an introduction, and I'm dealing with this subject also in my PhD. But what was interesting in my PhD, and I'm gonna just give few elements, because the problem with my PhD that I have a general topic, but we can say that each chapter could be a book in itself. So sometimes it's difficult to give a summary. But basically, you know, there are many things which has been written on Ijtihad and on the renewal of Islamic law and the fiqh al-nawazil wa tajdid al-fiqh al-fatawa. This is something which is known, and there are many things on that. So my point was to trying to look at the methodology, which hermeneutical methodology was used in the past, is used today to interpret, to understand, and to apply Islamic law. So we know what are the classical tools in usul al-fiqh, and I was trying to see if those methodologies have evolved through the time, and especially I was focused on the contemporary era. So for instance, I have one chapter, and I'm gonna soon publish a book specifically on this topic, first in French and hopefully in other language, on collective ijtihad. So basically in this chapter I explained that historically ijtihad was mainly practiced by an individual mujtahid, who was giving a fatwa. And at the beginning of the modern era, of the contemporary era, the idea of having a collective ijtihad started to be spread. For instance, in his famous book, Reconstruire la pensée religieuse de l'Islam, reconstructing the religious thought of Islam, of Muhammad Iqbal, he mentioned this idea of collective ijtihad. And we can find this also by reading some scholars such as Mustafa Zarqa or Draz, ممكن. Maybe Muhammad Abdullah Draz mentioned that too. Tahir ibn Ashur mentioned it. So there was this idea. So I'm talking about that. Who were the pioneers? I'm talking about the first premises of practical premises of collective ijtihad. And one historical example that I have given is Majalla, the Ottoman Majalla, which was a collective work of codifying Islamic law. At this time it was only Hanafi law which has been codified, but it was already an important historical step in the evolution of the Islamic hermeneutics and methodology. And then, during the second part of the 20th century, we had this institutionalization of al-majami al-fiqhiyya, of committees, official committees, especially the one who is related to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They have their own Committee of Islamic Law, which is gathering Islamic scholars from all over the world, from all countries, from all madahib, all schools, and trying to produce new fatawas on contemporary issues collectively. And then I'm analyzing the different arguments and evidences given by different scholars why collective ijtihad is relevant. Can we consider the results of collective ijtihad as a new ijma for the contemporary era or not? Or is it stronger than an individual ijtihad? And I'm also using some works of scholars in Islamic studies from Western academia, such as Kamil Mansour, who mentioned that in his work on ijma. Albert Ourani also mentioned the issue of ijma. So this is one part of my PhD, and I hope that my book will be a contribution when it comes to collective ijtihad, but I can say that in French it will be necessary contribution because it's the first book on the topic. You have books in Arabic, you have few papers in English, but in French it's almost empty. So, but it's a chance for me to contribute academically. So in my PhD, I'm also dealing with the issue of maqasid al-sharia. So my point was, okay, we have many scholars nowadays who are talking a lot about maqasid al-sharia as if it's the new tool, to renew Islamic law. But I thought that beyond the discourse, it was weaker when it comes to the details of the methodology. Okay, we say that we should interpret Islamic law in the light of maqasid al-sharia, but concretely in terms of methodology, what does it mean? Which are the tools to do that? So you have some contribution. Someone like Muhammad Hashim al-Kamali, maybe you know him because he's in Malaysia. Was saying that it should be through a renew of istihsan. So connecting maqasid to usul al-fiqh. So some other, it was more general. So I'm quoting, and you have Felicitas Opwis, who did interesting work on maqasid al-sharia. I forgot from which country she is, but she's known in academia on this topic. Maybe she is from UK, I'm not sure. So I was dealing with this issue, but from the hermeneutical and methodological perspective, not just to talk about maqasid al-sharia. I have a chapter on fiqh for minority, and once again, after having mentioned, the main elements of the theory and the legal theory, mentioning Tahajab al-Alwani and others. I was also focusing on the methodology. Did they provide a new methodology in dealing with the text and the context and the interpretation and the application? So this was my point to this topic. And I was dealing with other questions also with critical hadith studies or hadith criticism, how it has been used also as a tool. And no, this is out of usul al-fiqh. And when we talk about usul al-fiqh, it's qiyas, istihsan, ijma', etc. But here you have also other tools. For instance, I have noticed this in many books, such as Muhammad al-Ghazali or others. It's to look at the hadith, which is the basis of a rule. So if you challenge the hadith or its authenticity, reliability, you can also challenge the rules then. So it was also a methodology which has been used, and interestingly, it has been used both by what we can call reformists, so-called liberal Muslims, as well as literalist trends such as Salafiyya. You can find this kind of methodology also with people like Nasruddin al-Albani, but also with Nasser Abu Zaid, which was more representing the liberal trend. So it's interesting. They are at the opposite, but at the same time using more or less the same methodology to deal with the text. So, and I was pointing out this interesting paradox, in this chapter. Okay. Then I have a big part of my PhD, which is connecting so history, in a way, politics, and Islamic law. Where I'm talking about the connection between positive law and religious or Islamic law. And what is interesting is that I can say that it started at the end of the Ottoman Empire, with the Tanzimat, and then the Majalla, and the family code that has been also produced by the Ottoman at the end. So at this time, the idea was that the legal Western framework or the modern framework of the nation states became overwhelming and the dominant model for everybody, for all countries, and also in the Muslim world. So it started at the end of the Ottoman Empire, and when it comes to the Arab world, mainly it started when those states has been built after independence, after colonization, after I should say decolonization. So in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Iraq, in all those countries, have been built modern states. You have legal courts, civil courts, you have a parliament, you have a government, you have a constitution. So this is something new. This legal framework was not there back in the days when it comes to classical Islamic law. And some debates started to be raised, some issues started to be raised when it comes, so what is the place of Islam in all of this? And Islamic law. And Islam, was both important when it comes to the legal reference, as well as an identity reference for the identity, collective identity. And you had this debate in Morocco and all countries, all Muslim countries. And in Morocco, someone like Allal al-Fasi, rahimahullah, was part of this debate, And when a country like Morocco or Egypt or any country, but in their constitution, that Islam is the religion of the state, it's something totally new historically. You are putting Islam in the framework of the modern nation state. So what does it mean? What are the implications? And one of the implications is that we had this case in Egypt, and Professor Intisar Rab from Harvard University published a very interesting paper on this issue. It means that in Egypt they have an article in the constitution saying that Sharia Islamiyya مصدر من مصادر التشريع. So it means that if there is a law voted in the parliament which is not compliant with Sharia, it means that this law could not be applied. So how do we deal with that? And as you have a constitutional court in Egypt with civil judges which are not fuqaha, they will have to deal with that and say if this law is compliant with Islam or not. So it's a totally new framework, and practically, and this is what I say in my PhD, it means that the state, with all its institutions, the parliament, the courts, are part of the process of Ijtihad and interpreting Islamic law. So it's not anymore the monopoly of the fuqaha or the scholars. It's a fact. This is what happened in reality. Yes. Even in Morocco, when with the reform of the Mudawana, yes, you had the fuqaha were part of the process, but not only the fuqaha. You had the civil rights organizations, female organizations, you had the politicians, members of parliament. So it's a totally new framework. So in this part, I explained that the state became an actor of Ijtihad in the making of Islamic law, but within the framework of positive law. Because a part of Islamic law has been integrated into positive law, mainly when it comes to ahwal al-shakhsiyya, to the family law. And sometimes, people are just saying that, okay, so it's part of the positive law, but it has many implications in terms of authority. And I mentioned one example. Theoretically, in I would say Islamic legal theory or classical Islamic law, there is this idea that Sharia, so this is the law of God, of Allah, so it's above everything. Okay? But if you put Sharia in the constitution, it means that the authority of Sharia is relevant only because the constitution said it. So in a way it means that theoretically it's only a theoretical issue. You know? It means that the constitution is above. So how do you deal with this issue? You know? And I made a comparison with the French and European law, because you have an article in the French constitution saying that the French law should be compliant with European and international laws. So when you look at this from the international law perspective, international law is above by essence. But when you see it from within the French legal framework or the French constitutionalism, the international law is above only because the constitution allowed it. So I made a comparison between both issues, and this is something that some scholars in America or other countries have raised. Barbara Johnson mentioned this issue of how the integration of Islamic law within positive law had many implications. So my PhD was dealing with those issues, so focusing on methodology. And there is also a difference between the Western countries. For instance, myself, as it has been said by Dr. Hassan, last year I was a scholar in residence at the Schomburg Center in New York, so I had this opportunity to deal with US academia and universities, and both in Islamic studies and African American studies. And I can say that Islamic studies are more developed and equipped in UK and in the US than France. When it comes to the journals, to the centers for research, the opportunities, and even I would say that the open-mindedness in the US and UK, which is definitely better and stronger than France, it's also an asset for them, because you will attract more people, like someone like Wael Halak, which is known worldwide today as a reference. So he's in the US. Why is he in the US? Because in the US, they are providing more opportunities, more space, more freedom to produce. So definitely in comparison, even if I'm French, I got my PhD in France, and I say without any doubt that there are great scholars in France too, but definitely it's more developed in the US and Canada and UK. And to give you an example, some years ago I was invited to deliver a lecture at the Islamic Studies Department of McGill University in Montreal in Canada. And there is the head of someone in the department made a tour for me, and I visited their library. I was amazed. They have a huge and very wealthy library in Islamic studies. It's incredible. I think it's one of the biggest in the world, with the one of Harvard. So this is something that we can take advantage of and benefit from. And if some of you are in the future also, if you are going, you get some opportunities to travel in those countries, I think it's important to have this complex understanding. Like, it's not black or white, and you have good aspects, bad aspects, and it's the same here, I think, like everywhere. And it's important just to get this understanding of the context, of the differences, of the references and the framework. And actually, I think that in Morocco, the potential in Morocco is just incredible. When I meet some scholars here, professors, some students, I'm always amazed by the level of knowledge, of understanding, the interest when it comes to many fields of academic fields or studies. And I think that it's an asset for Morocco, to contribute to progress of the knowledge and the science within Morocco, but also I think that Moroccan academia, Moroccan scholarship could be a reference worldwide when it comes to Islamic studies and other fields. So as students, really I ensure you to continue to do what you do, to have this, to be open-minded about the world. So this is good also to have this openness about languages, learning English, learning French and maybe Spanish and other languages. And it will be an asset for you, because now many, in all fields, most of the sources are in English.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to science. I was very happy to be with you today, and I don't know if there is a debate with people, or if you don't have time.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Yanis, for this amazing session. Jazakallah khair. I hope this session was very beneficial to you as students, and it opens up a lot of research opportunities in the future. We will talk about collective ijtihad and so on and so forth. So we will collect the questions, and then Dr. Yanis will answer all of your questions, inshallah. Amazing session. Jazakallah khair. I hope this session was very beneficial to you as students, and it opens up a lot of research opportunities in the future. We will talk about it. If you have any questions that you want to ask, and then Dr. Yanis will answer all of your questions, inshallah.
Welcome to our university. I'm so glad to have teachers like you in our university. You mentioned before that the way of dealing with the sources, Islamic sources, is different from the Egyptian. You mentioned that you're dealing with sources as a primary and secondary sources by taking a step back. Yes, taking a step back. But the other no, they just deal with those sources as if it's something. Question here: how do you deal with an issue if it comes, like, for example, in Maqasid Sharia, and you found a contemporary scholar who said the contrary of what is in the primary?
Second question. Thank you, Mr. Yanis, for all this great information. My question is about. I think that it's not a question, but it's about the clauses of Ijtihad. We need to know why the scholars we need to close Ijtihad, because in this area there is not a scholars which is able to deduce the Quran or Sunnah. Also, we say that we need in this time to renew the ruling to be suitable with the contemporary issue, but also we need the characteristic and the condition before making.
شكرا دكتور حسن، شكرا دكتور رشيد، شكرا دكتور يانيس. أعتقد أن سعيد أن أعقد هذا اللقاء، وربما وقع فيه توافقات عجيبة فلذلك هذا اللقاء عبارة عن رزق ساقه الله لنا. الساعة الثالثة البارحة بتوافق عجيب وغريب ما بيني وبين حسن وبين رشيد. فالاسم أتى من تطوان، من تطوان أتى اسم آخر أنا الاسم أتى لي من تطوان، سيرتك التي أتت لي من تطوان، واقترحت على رشيد في نفس اللحظة. اقترحها حسن على رشيد، فكان أمر عجيبا وغريبا جدا. ثلاثون دنيا تقريبا الواقع. لذلك اعتقد ان هذا الرزق هذا اللقاء رزق ساقه الله لنا لكي نتعرف على خبره بحثيه شابه جدا استطاعت ان تجمع بين الدراسات الاسلاميه باللغه الفرنسيه وان تنفتح ايضا على المنجز الانجلو ساكسوني وهو الجزء الثاني من قصته، خصوصا الدراسات الإفريقية الإسلامية داخل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية من خلال تجربة مالكوم إكس. أعتقد هذا شيء آخر من تجربته لم يشاركه معنا، خصوصا أعتقد أن في سيرته أنه أجرى أزيد من 50 مقابلة مع الأشخاص الذين لديهم علاقة مع مالكوم إكس. فأعتقد أن هذا جانب آخر من تجربة الدكتور يانيس. فأنا سعيد أن الله عز وجل يسر سبل هذا اللقاء ويسر سبل هذه التوافقات، أن الباحثين في كلية الشريعة يعني يتعرف على بعض النماذج البحثية داخل الأكاديمية الغربية، وأن يعرف على الأقل سقف الاهتمامات ومجالات المشتركة. وأعتقد المقدمة التي قدم بها الباحث أعطى لكم خرائط من أسماء فكرية لها أثر في مشهد الدراسات الإسلامية، بدءا بكبير من الذين علمهم السحل وجوزيف شخص، لأن هذا لا يمكن في الدراسات الإسلامية الغربية أن نتجاوز جوزيف شخص، فبه المبتدأ وإلى المنتهى الآخر. لا يمكن أن تصنع اسمك إذن إلا أن تقرأ. فلذلك وائل حلاق صانعه أنه هدم هذا الصنم، فقال بأن على الأقل سأزيل صنمية جوزيف شخص في الدراسات الإسلامية الغربية من خلال دراساته النقدية، خصوصا فيما ذكره الباحث قضية الاجتهاد. فذلك المقال الصغير 40 صفحة هو الذي استطاع به 1984 أن يدخل وائل حلاق لمشهد الدراسات الإسلامية من خلال تقديمه رؤية أخرى مغالبة لمشكلة لماذا أغلق باب الاجتهاد، وطرح إشكالات وفرضيات جميلة. الذي لفتني بأن الدكتور يانيس ذكر لكم مجموعة من الأسماء، وهذا مهم لأن للأسف طلبة الشريعة ليست عندهم خريطة فكرية بالأسماء المؤثرة داخل الأكاديمية الغربية، وهذا مدخل جيد. ذكر لكم مثلا جوناثان براون الذي يعتبر الآن من بين العلماء المتخصصين في الحديث النبوي الشريف. ذكر لكم اسم آخر اللي هو جاكسون الذي يعتبر من بين المتخصصين في الإمام القرافي وفي السياسة الشرعية بشكل غريب جدا. وذكر لكم آخر كتاب له هو كتاب علمانية الإسلام. وذكر لكم أسماء أخرى متعلقة ببعض أسماء بين آخر. هذا المشهد المركب بأسمائه ضروري الطالب أن يعرف وذكر لكم الاسم الذي تكرر كثيرا وهي الآن على قمة الأكاديمية الغربية اللي هي الدكتورة انتصار رد، اللي هي مديرة قسم القانون الإسلامي في جامعة هارفارد. وهناك أسماء أخرى. الذي أريد أن ألفت لكم النظر بأن بالإضافة إلى الأكاديمية الغربية الأنجلوساكسونية يجب الالتفات إلى الأكاديمية الأخرى في نواحي العالم الإسلامي. في ماليزيا من خلال أسماء غير متداولة مثل الدكتور محمد نقيب عطاس، هذا ضروري أن يعرف، خصوصا محمد نقيب عطاس بشكل كبير. أسماء أخرى في أندونيسيا مثل الدكتور عزت حسين، خصوصا في سياسة تقنين الشريعة. أسماء أخرى في الأكاديمية الباكستانية، خصوصا الدكتور راشد برادة اكتشف لنا اسم مغمور وكنت سعيد في التعاون معه في اكتشاف هذا الاسم، هو الدكتور محمد خالد مسعود. لدينا في الأكاديمية التركية باللغة الإنجليزية راجب شانكوب اللي هو رئيس جامعة ابن خلدون والآن هو رئيس جامعة أحمد بن خلدون. الذي أقصد أن ما فعله الدكتور عبد يانيس أن نعرف على الأقل خريطة الفكرية والأسماء. أعتقد هذا مدخل منهجي ومعرفي ومفيد للطالب لكي يعرف على الأقل سقف النقاش وحدود التموقع، بأن على الأقل أن يحس بأنه ما يدرس في كلية الشريعة ليس نقاشا منفصلا عن النقاش الأكاديمي العالمي، ولا يحس بهذه حالة الهوان والإدلال الحضاري، وأن يحس بعزة لأنه أمام نقاش. فأعتقد بأن هذه الورشة جيدة جدا ومفيدة، وأجدد شكري للدكتور يانيس. واعتقد البارحه ربما عليه علامات السهر البارحه حتى الساعه 1:30 ليلا. فانا سعيد ان تحقق هذا اللقاء وان تحققت هذا التواصل العلمي والاكاديمي، وشكرا جزيلا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dr. Yanis, welcome in our university. Welcome and welcome. It's your university. We know that Fatima is changed by time and place and what are you think about Ijtihad, the level of Ijtihad in Europe? Because you are a academic PhD in a student PhD in French. What is the level of Ijtihad and making fatwa in Europe, and what is the level of Ijtihad and making fatwa in Western academy Europe?
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome, Dr. Yanis. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned a scholar, which is a famous scholar in Morocco. Al-University has a book about مقاصد الشريعة, مقاصد الشريعة ومكارمها. And he stated comparatory, and he was he analyzed the story of our nation. He saw that when we go to the fourth foundation of Sharia, consensus, they practice consensus. In fact, the most decisions are taken by fact and agreement. This agreement should be applied in the most of nation to
First of all, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very, very much, and you are so welcome. This is your university, our university. Yes. So my question is, do you agree with the idea that the Islamic law or Sharia cannot be applied in the modern state? What do you think?
In the modern
You welcome Mr. Yanis to this faculty of Sharia. Actually, I have a general question. It's mixed between the question of my colleague Ali and my sister Asma. It's say, what are the challenges? There are some challenges faced with you, for example, to adapt this. Let's say this maqasid, to adapt this modern context today. Some challenges, and how can you deal with this challenges?
Okay, so many questions. But what is good is that I can connect different answers.
Yes.
So I'm gonna start with yours. So first of all, myself, I'm really talking from my own experience and perspective, and I don't consider at all that the framework, academic framework in the West is better than what we can have in Morocco or in Turkey or other countries. And I have a lot of respect, for the traditional Islamic scholars, for the ulama. The only thing I'm saying is that you have two different worlds, if I can say, two different spaces, but those spaces are dealing with the same subject, Islam. So what I think that there are many interactions, and both can be seen as complementary. And the difference is that if you have an Islamic scholar, he will tell you what is right and what is wrong. Myself, I have also my own view on what is right and what is wrong as a Muslim. But in the frame of my work, in academic work, I don't say, okay, this is the right opinion. For instance, I'm going to use a fatwa and explain the methodology of the alim, of the mujtahid, that he has used to issue this fatwa. But I won't say that this fatwa is right or wrong, because I don't feel that I have the authority for that. And there are people who are more equipped than me to say that. My role is that to analyze the methodology, or to be critical, but from another point of view, to see if the opinion or the methodology is consistent in terms of what is a logic, legal methodology. So this is the point. And I think that a student in general, even if he believes 100% in his religion, he can always just intellectually, for the sake of research, take a step back. It doesn't mean that he challenges his beliefs. No, he's just taking a step back. And this is also a way, like for instance, and you mentioned that, if you want to challenge the opinion or the work of someone like Joseph Schacht, you have to read him first.
Yes.
So understanding his understanding. And the best way to challenge him is to use the same tools, but to deconstruct and to criticize his work. This is what Wael Halaq has done. Because I give you one example. As Muslim, we consider that the Quran is the word of God. سمعنا وأطعنا. As Muslim. But in an academic debate in the framework of the West, it has no sense to say that. It has no authority. Here it has authority, because it's a Muslim country in a Muslim environment, so it's different. If you want to defend the view, the Islamic view or the view of Muslims, you will have just to use other arguments. And what I think that it's not like, okay, in this country or in those countries they have to change their methodology. I'm just saying that now the world is globalized and it's important to know what's going on there and taking some good aspects, maybe improving some aspects here, which could be reformed, and at the same time keeping what is good here and promote it. Saying, no, we have also great... I met yesterday, mashallah, a scholar who is working on codicology, on Makhtutat. So it's a great work, valuable, worldwide. So my only point is to say that some interaction are possible and some mutual influences when it comes to the positive sides of both. This is the only thing I say. And on my side, and I'm gonna switch to the other questions. I can switch and say, okay, as Muslim and as Muslim who has studied Islam, this is what I think. Okay. But if I stay only in the frame of the scholar in Islamic studies, like I did in my PhD, I try to be neutral about that. But it doesn't mean that I don't have my own beliefs. So this is the point. And I would like to thank you for what you said, and you reminded us about the historical context of Ijtihad and the gate of if the gate of Ijtihad was closed and why. So I think it's important. And it's important also to have Islamic scholars from within saying, okay, this is Ijtihad and its conditions, and also Ijtihad has limits. You can't, and this is what Dr. Hassan said, you can't say whatever you want and say, okay, in the light of Maqasid al-Sharia, I said whatever I want. And this is what some people are doing now. So I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And about the scholar, this is what I tried to do in my PhD. I used the work and the books and production of many Islamic scholars, mainly contemporary, Wahab al-Zuhaili, Mustafa Zarqa, and many known scholars. Then the Western academia, Wael Halaq and others, Felicia Opuis, and even my European context. So you had many contributions. It's still something which is an ongoing process, because in France you have or in Europe you have all nationalities, meaning you have all schools, all trends. So it's difficult to unify. It's not like in Morocco, more or less, all people follow the Maliki school. So it's easier to unify. Maqasid wal Ijma', it was yours. Yeah, but just what I can share about that is that I quoted many times Ala al-Fasi in my PhD, both his book on Maqasid al-Sharia and the one Difa' al-Sharia. And I was very amazed and interested by the quality of what he has produced, and definitely he was ahead of his time when it comes to Islamic thought and on many issues, and when it comes to Maqasid. So about the issue of Ijma', I don't have the authority to say, okay, so we can do that about Ijma', but I just can share what I have read and studied, And so you had some scenarios. So how do you want to deal with European people if it's only in Arabic? You have to spread what you have done in French, in English. It has been done, but not enough. I was thinking about someone else, but I forgot which one I was thinking about. But yeah, okay. So one interesting example is Taha al-Alwani. So he's a great Islamic scholar from Iraq. He was in America, living there, and he gets very good knowledge and understanding of the American and Western context. And he's one of the intellectual father of the fiqh for minority. And his contribution not only was influential in the US, even in Europe, and then he had also an impact in some Islamic countries. So, you know, and he is also an example of this interaction between scholars which are within academia and Islamic scholars within the Muslim community. To give you one example, again, Professor Jonathan Brown, who is also Muslim, so he's at Georgetown, so you know, he's a very well-known university in the US. And at the same time, he's part of Al-Yaqin Institute, created mainly by Omar Suleiman. And in this frame, it is complex, or in America or in Canada. But you have very interesting institution and great scholars. So I was about to talk about this. So the European Council for Fatwa and Research was one of the most important institutions when it comes to producing fatwa for the European context. And it's still an important institution in Islam, and you have some people like, you know, like Omar Suleiman in the US, who is trying to adapt the Islamic discourse within the American society. And actually in the US you have
for Dr. Rashid Brother to conclude the session. Thank you so much, Mr.
Dealing with some Fulbright job and things like that, and they dealt with so many scholars like Zahra and Agadir Morocco. Internationally, is one of the great scholars too in the comparative law. As Mr. Abdali told you, it's very important to know these names, especially when we are dealing with the comparative studies. And you know that, by the way, we have inshallah a conference about comparative studies with students here, and we will deal with many subjects which relate between Sharia and other Western laws. And it's important for students to know these names. Maybe it will bring some ideas to your mind and make research about it. So now also it's not only us who are researching in the Islamic studies, but we studies in Islamic studies who can do the research in a way that is very productive. Okay, Mr. Yanis talked about how in US or UK or either in Holland, Netherlands, there are many researchers who did many articles and published many books about Islamic studies, which are very, very crucial to know about and to read. And this license of excellence is the way for us to know about these names and deal with them and give us ideas about our future research. One thing that I paid attention to is the use of, in your PhD, you say that you use methodological perspective in your this is very interesting. So when you deal, but so he has a methodology in dealing with these names. You say that you deal with Western names and deal with Arabic names and many researchers. So we got to have a method to deal with these names. So he said that he use a methodological perspective in his PhD, and this is very interesting. We are waiting for it to be published, inshallah, and to be translated into English and Arabic in the future, inshallah. So thank you so much. I will not take much time because it's Jumu'ah prayer.
قولا ونحنا منا نذكر